through the worst of it.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Budget 2021 discussion. We got a full house today. So, James, I'll let you start off with introductions and we'll get started.
Great, thank you. And thank you for everybody attending tonight. And I've got three of my rock star colleagues out with me tonight. We've got three different shadow ministers, all in important portfolios as it relates to the budget that the Liberals brought down. And tonight's the night that we'll be able to have a conversation around the budget and be able to answer some of your questions. So we have Pat Kelly, who's the shadow minister for small business, and Ed Fast, who's the shadow minister for finance, and Pierre Poilievre, who's the shadow minister for jobs. So it's great to have the three of you today. And the format we're going to do tonight is a little bit different than what you've seen before. Rather than all of us ramble on about the good and bad of the budget, and there's probably more bad than good in our humble opinion, I'm going to pose a few questions to my colleagues, and then that'll get us started, and then we'll dig right into your questions. So I've got a couple openers here, and I'll start up with Ed, given that he's the shadow minister of finance, and he was up in the House today questioning the finance minister with. I'm not sure if you got a lot of answers, Ed, but we'll give you a chance here to say, given that all we've heard about the budget, what is your greatest concern if this is in fact the budget that we use to model economic recovery?
Well, this was the biggest spending budget the country has ever seen. And what was really notable, James, was that in the minister's speech today, she not once mentioned deficit. She not once mentioned the word debt, not once mentioned the word inflation, not once mentioned the word interest. It was all about spending. And the problem is budgets are supposed to be about much more than spending. They're about placing our spending within the context of the economic realities that our country faces, making sure that the fiscal environment within which all of the spending takes place is one that is sustainable long-term. It was very clear from the minister's answer, she didn't want to talk about debt or deficits because she doesn't have a debt management plan that is defensible or credible.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Ed. And we've talked about this before. I love the term that this is not build back better, this is build back bigger, because it's massive. So Pierre, the budget talks a lot about training for new jobs. So any idea what this budget's talking about when they refer to new jobs? Aren't there vacancies in current jobs? And, you know, here in Alberta, as you would know, and we've talked about before, we definitely want some jobs, but I'm not sure what the retraining plan is in the budget. What are your thoughts on the job creation in the budget? Oh, your mic's not working there, Pierre. Still off. Okay, I'll come back to you. So we'll come back to Pierre when we got a little technical difficulty.
Is that working?
There, now you're working.
Excellent. There we go. Sorry about that. I'm getting so old now that I can't keep up with all this modern technology. But this is not a paycheck budget. It's a credit card debt budget. There is no interest in generating pre-enterprise paychecks within this government. There's only interest in taking more from people's existing paychecks and borrowing from future generations. So the government could have, if it really wanted to unleash productive investment and job creation, could have repealed its anti-pipeline and development bills. It could have streamlined approval for us to develop our 1,220 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. It could have approved pipelines so that we could get world prices for our petroleum. But it did none of those things. In fact, it continued to suppress our number one net export, which is oil and gas. And, you know, it's funny, they talk about this green transition, this unicorns and butterfly utopia. Well, Elon Musk is, of course, the founder of the biggest electric car company in the world. He said this the other day: if there was a button I could press to stop all hydrocarbon usage today, I would not press it. Reporter asks, you would not press it? Of course not, he says. You would not press it because, asked the reporter, it would cause human civilization to come to a halt. Every hospital would have to close down. It would be ridiculous. It would be irresponsible to press that button. What does need to happen, if we can, is to accelerate the transformation. That is the sensible thing to do. Well, the government doesn't seem to realize we're going to have 1 million barrels of oil consumed in the world every single day for at least the next 2 decades, according to the International Energy Agency. And the only question is whether it is Canadian oil that contributes to that, or if it is dirty foreign oil. We as conservatives believe in removing the obstacles to allow clean, green Canadian production of Western and Newfoundland petroleum products, so that we can ensure that the petroleum we do consume is from the cleanest country in the world, and that's Canada.
Absolutely. You're dead on, Pierre. So Pat, we'll move on to you. Your new portfolio, small business. So what's Main Street going to look like for small business based upon what you saw in this budget?
Well, I think things are going to be tough on Main Street for quite a while. I think we all know that small businesses have borne the brunt of the COVID pandemic and the corresponding lockdowns, and this budget isn't going to help much. The small businesses, many are just hanging by a thread. Tens of thousands have gone out of business, and of the small businesses that remain, most of them have taken on significant new debt. In fact, on average, about 170,000 per business. And this debt is not just from government support programs, and although much of it is, these small businesses, I mean, they're behind on rent, they're behind on payments to suppliers, and this is going to make it very difficult for many small businesses to recover, which is why we need a growth-oriented budget. We need to get this economy moving. We need the private economy moving. We need paychecks in the pockets of consumers. These are the kinds of things that small businesses are going to need if they're going to survive.
Yeah, and Pat, before I leave you, the big miss in this budget is that there's still very little support, if any, for new businesses or reincorporated businesses. I ran into a restaurateur who's been in business for 20 years. He moved locations, changed his incorporation, and he says, I've got nothing, and I've been in business for 20 years.
Yeah, this is something that we flagged a very long time ago, that there is nothing in amongst all of the billions upon billions that the government has spent. There is nothing to help sustain a new business. And, these aren't businesses that are trying to game the system by, opening up or incorporating a company after the pandemic in order to qualify for assistance. These are businesses that invested in many cases, their life's savings in 2018, 2019, early part of 2020. I've got a constituent in exactly that position where they had an existing business that they had to shut down for much of 2019 to rebuild, retool. It was a restaurant as well, reinvent themselves, and spent an enormous amount of money on their premises. They opened, or they had a scheduled opening date, I think, of March 15th. And because they don't meet the year-over-year loss criteria due to being closed down in 2019, they get nothing. And they've invested everything that they accumulated in the 20 years of business that they had prior to that. So it's new businesses are perhaps the hardest hit of all the small businesses who, as I say, have completely borne the brunt of the COVID pandemic.
Yeah. So Mark, let's see what we got from questions that were either sent in or from the floor tonight.
Okay, perfect. So the first question we have coming in from Joanne, she just wants to address how we can hold this current government accountable. James, do you want to start us off?
Well, and thanks for the question, Joanne. We're trying every day. I tell you, and maybe the media doesn't report it, but I and our colleagues are doing it every day. We're in committee, in the House, on a variety of different issues, and it's frustrating. But I hope the Canadians will start to see that we're doing the very best we can. But it is frustrating, and I can tell you we've put through positive changes and recommendations to policies that sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. But it's difficult to pin them down on being accountable. I'll maybe turn it to some of the other my colleagues who have been at this a lot longer than I have, and if they if they see there's a different way to do it, maybe start with I'll start with Pierre.
Mean a different way to advance these economic ideas?
No, how do we hold these guys? Yeah, the current government accountable, and I think she's referring to it in more of a general question.
Yeah, I think that we need to. Parliament should be a place where the most powerful people in the land tremble when they walk in the door. It is not meant to be a gentle, quiet, serene establishment. In countries where parliaments are like that, they're normally dictatorships. If you want to hold the government accountable, you need an aggressive, focused opposition that's determined to get answers and make life extremely uncomfortable for the powerful. It is a place where the mighty must be made low. That's why question period must be sharp, pointed, and factual, and committees must be exactly the same. Yeah. The committees are places where we should ask pointed questions repeatedly until we get answers. The first priority of a parliamentarian committee is to get answers. The last priority is to be polite. That is not the goal of parliamentary committees. In fact, I just posted a moment ago what Orwell said. He said, if liberty is to mean anything at all, it is the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. And if there is any job the opposition has, it is just that. And so we need to use question period and our committee process to relentlessly interrogate powerful people in the government, not just the ministers, but the top bureaucratic officials, the head of the Bank of Canada, the head of the RCMP, every single powerful establishment in the country should be brought low in Parliament. That is our job.
Yeah. Do you want to add to that, Ed? You've been at this for a while.
Well, on that point, I would say that you can do that and still be respectful, right? And that is what we strive to do. Each one of us brings a different approach to holding people in power to account. And getting back to the original question, which is, how do we hold this government accountable? We presently operate within a context in which Justin Trudeau operates like he has a majority government, because the NDP has basically pledged their fealty to him. They're committed to him. They're slowly but surely becoming irrelevant simply because they are now just an appendage of the Liberal Party. So how do we get through that? It's by being persistent, by not giving up. A lot of messaging doesn't sink through until it's been repeated 100 times or 200 times. That's why you'll see us asking questions in the House of Commons again and again and again. That's why our communications coming out of our offices, whether they're shadow ministers or MPs, communications are persistent. And I've seen this. I've been at this for about 15 years federally. And sometimes you think, you know what, we're just not making headway. We're just having difficulty holding the government to account. Then suddenly the message gets through to Canadians and things start turning. So I'm not the type of person that's got an abundance of patience, but I understand that repeating the same message again and again may seem tiresome, but often it can pay great dividends down the road.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything to that, Pat?
Just a little bit. as Pierre said, Parliament is there. Parliament is there to its essence is to protect citizens from the potential of tyranny from the Crown. I mean, this is what Parliament came into existence for, and it's not a safe place for the Prime Minister to feel comfortable. But there are seldom real knockout punches in Parliament. As Ed said, it's a war of attrition. It's daily, and it's with and we have many tools available to us, and we use all of them. And we have tools outside of Parliament too. And we do. And our leader is makes announcements in the media every day. All of our members are very active in the use of our social media channels. So it's in evenings like this where we communicate to constituents. We just have to use every tool that's available to us, every parliamentary tool and every party organizational tool to take our message to Canadians, so that Canadians can have trust in Conservatives and elect a Conservative government over this terrible Liberal one.
Great, thanks, Pat. All right, Mark, what's up?
Okay, so this next question is from Renee. So Renee asked, what amendments to Bill C-10 did the Liberals add, and is the government still regulating free speech? James, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. They're absolutely C-10, which has been a lightning rod of controversy, and it's controversial because this is a botched piece of legislation. It's an attack on freedom and freedom, liberty, and the ability of people to be able to participate in the environment like this. You know, this is an example of where they brought a piece of legislation in, and then they slipped in. It wasn't that they slipped something in this time; they took something out. So they amended a piece of legislation, took something out, which actually would have given better protection to people to be able to participate in a variety of different social media channels. And they got caught. And the problem is that overall, I think what the intent is that they want to be more controlling. And that's typical of this government. It was sneaky, and it's worrisome, and I think it should have everybody's attention, and it certainly has our attention. Well, maybe anybody want to add to that? I know Pierre's got a petition going. Pierre, maybe you want to chat a bit about it.
You summed it up very well. The bill seeks to regulate the major platforms on which Canadians make their views known. Everything from Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and more. And the purported reason is to extend the regulations that now apply to broadcasters onto those other new modern web-based platforms. The government first claimed that this would not affect the posts that you and I make online because there was an exclusion for something called user-generated content. Well, they amended the bill to take that out. So there is no longer an exclusion. And therefore, every single person that posts anything online is going to be considered a broadcaster for the purposes of the federal law. And therefore, their content can be regulated by the CRTC. A former CRTC commissioner, Peter Menzies from Calgary, has said that this is a hammer, in his words, that would intimidate freedom of expression, and that it is a full-out assault on free speech. Let me say that there is no amendment that can fix this bill. It is a terrible bill. It is designed to extend the power and reach of a federal bureaucracy into the internet. There are no circumstances under which that can be accepted, even if they put in some kind of fake exemption like they had before. The bottom line is Canada has 30 million regulators of the internet. They're called consumers. Everyday people regulate content with their finger clicks. You click on something, you watch it. You don't, you don't. It's your choice. The government has no role. If someone commits a crime and that is posted online, well, the criminal code can deal with that. You can call the cops and say, I've just witnessed a crime online, and that can be prosecuted in a criminal court. That is far different than having content regulated. Frankly, there is far more Canadian content on the internet than there is through the traditional state licensed broadcasting organizations. And so we don't need government regulation to create more Canadian content. What we need is freedom of expression. And that's what Conservatives are fighting for. My Facebook has a petition. You can click on it and sign up if you want to fight back against this bill.
Yeah, a classic example, Pierre, of where we need less regulation and not more. This is a classic example of huge overreach. Do you want to add to that, Pat or Ed?
I'll just add, I mean, Pierre and James have summed up the bill perfectly. A subtlety that occurred to me on this, though, with this particular minister. So this minister was recruited to be a so-called star candidate for the Liberals. He is a lifelong environmental activist opposed to the oil and gas industry, and a pretty extreme one. During the election, he was the one on the Liberal side actually that told the truth and admitted in an interview that the whole purpose of Bill C-69 was to make sure pipelines could never get built in Canada. So this is the minister that now wants to regulate what you and I put on the internet.
Frightening. Ed, anything you want to add?
No, my colleagues have summed it up well. I would only add a couple of kudos. First of all, Pierre, of course, has taken a lead in exposing this attempt to suppress our freedom of expression. Rachel Harder has done a yeoman service in raising this in the House of Commons. And in fact, the minister of censorship, attacked her for her personal beliefs in the House of Commons. It was so vicious and so uncalled for, but it's reflective of an ideology that lives within not only that minister, but within the Liberal Party. And then I would also note that Michelle Rempel has she's posted some wonderful things that really get to the nub of the issue. And, every time Pierre or Rachel or Michelle go out there and they start posting stuff that is really, really effective, it provokes a lot of response. And that's good because it means Canadians are starting to tune in and realize that the government we have in Ottawa is not looking out for their interests. In fact, that government wants to control its citizens.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks, Ed. Okay, Mark, what's up? What's next up?
All righty, so we're going to keep with Ed on this one. So the next question is, why are seniors being ignored? I do not live in a long-term care facility, which is where all the money has been given. What does a one-time payment of $500 do for seniors who are over 75?
Well, I believe that the Prime Minister has done a calculation that $500 payment will win your vote and the vote of other seniors over the age of 75. I hope that's not true. I believe that Canadians are a heck of a lot smarter than that. They understand when they're being snookered, when they're being bought. There's the other issue, which is, of course, the increase in the old age security, which is ongoing and is a permanent program. And the government has yet to share with Canadians how it actually is going to manage all of these new permanent spending programs that it is creating. I don't for a moment begrudge seniors an increase in their OAS. But this is only one of a number of new permanent spending programs that this government, this Minister of Finance has brought forward, who has a mandate letter that I've reviewed many times directly from the Prime Minister, and it says, you will not create any new permanent spending programs. It's like she just tossed that letter and just went on her own way. Quite frankly, I don't think the Prime Minister was really serious when he issued the mandate letters. He has violated, or his ministers have violated, so many parts of their mandate letters. It's like the Prime Minister's promises. There's promise after promise after promise that is broken. I believe the Prime Minister honestly believes that Canadians will not hold him accountable for those broken promises that they are forgiving and they simply forget about it. I believe the Canadians are smarter than that, and they're starting to tune into the fact that this is a prime minister that doesn't have our interests, our Canadians' interests at heart.
Yeah, and Ed, before I move to my colleagues, one thing that very seldom does anyone talk about, and particularly this Liberal government, is there's a lot of focus on, okay, a $500 payment or a slight increase in what you're going to receive. Rarely does anyone talk about what about the excess costs that we're starting to see into the marketplace. More taxes, more costs, cost of living's going up, inflation's going up. All of those things are big drivers for seniors. It's more expensive to heat your home. It's more expensive to get your groceries. And a lot of that's by bad policy by this government. So they're raising the costs and then throw $500 at you. I would ask seniors, where's your net by the time it's done? And I would tell you, I think you're behind. I think you're behind because of bad policy. Anybody want to add to that?
I'll just
Go ahead, Pat.
I'll just add quickly that on the point of inflation. I mean, inflation is a it's a tax on especially on people on fixed incomes, and this is something that the government has not faced up to. The inflationary pressure from both its fiscal and also in particular from monetary policy as well, and this is going to harm seniors significantly if they don't immediately get this under control.
So Pierre, we'll let you finish off. Inflation's not a problem, is it, Pierre? There's no issue with inflation, is there? It's not an issue.
Well, that's what they had been telling us for the longest time. I started, as you know, we were on committee together at Finance, and I started asking about inflation a year ago. And the central bankers and the ministers all said, no, there will be no inflation. In fact, they said there would be disinflation. Disinflation. Again and again and again, the central bankers used that term. And now, of course, what is happening is what always happens, what has been happening for thousands of years when leaders, dictators, emperors, kings, and others create more cash, the price of everything goes up. When money's cheap, everything else gets expensive. Our money supply has grown by 20% in 1 year. That might be a record. And as a result, we're seeing real estate rise by over 30%. Food is expected to rise by over 5%. This year. Raw materials are up 50%, commodities 50% this year. That will all trickle down through the system. Lumber prices have quadrupled. Of course, lumber is needed for almost everything around your house. So here we are. A flood of money has led to higher prices. And as Pat and Ed pointed out earlier, inflation is a tax, and it's a tax on the poor. It's a tax on those with fixed incomes that don't grow. And it benefits only the very wealthy because their assets, of course, inflate. So if you have a $10 million house and it goes up by 30%, well, there's $3 million that you didn't have to work for. But if you're a working class renter, well, you're out of luck. You'll never get into a house and the price of everything goes up. So listen, we've got to fight the inflation tax and bring back sound money.
Yeah. And $500 for a senior isn't going to cover it for sure.
No, sure not.
Yeah. So next question, Mark.
All righty. So Pat, this one is going to be for you. A lot of small businesses who did receive the CEBA are still having a hard time and won't be able to pay it back in the time it's supposed to be. What do you think about extending the period of repayment?
Well, this is just it. The CEBA is a program that was there was broad uptake, and it was a program that helped many businesses when they really needed help. But businesses don't want loans; they want customers. And I would say maybe the biggest failing of this budget is its lack of a clear plan toward a safely, permanently reopened economy, so that small businesses can get their customers back. And it's that inability to be able to have a safe, reopened economy is why this question comes up. Businesses we're not planning on being closed throughout 2021 as well as 2020. And this is what is driving the calls for extensions on CEBA. These businesses, many of them, like I said earlier, it's an average of 170,000 a business. So, maybe 40,000 of that is CEBA, and much of the rest of that are other bills that they can't pay. So, this is unfortunately a policy consideration resulting from such terrible failure. I think a government that forces businesses to close has a responsibility to extend aid to businesses. But I'd rather just see a reopened economy and get our businesses back working so that they can repay their CEBA loans.
Yeah, and that's ultimately, Pat, what they want. Every business that I talk to, and I'm sure my colleagues on the line, they want to get back to work. They really don't want to take on more debt. They really don't want more programs. They really want to get back to work as soon as possible. Do you want to add to that, Ed?
Yes, I would. Pat has highlighted the fact that these are closures that were imposed on businesses. They didn't bring these closures upon themselves. And that's the problem with this budget, because this budget is actually not a budget that has a plan to reopen our economy safely. It just does not have that kind of a plan. And if it doesn't have that kind of a plan, you can expect that we will continue to have economic headwinds in Canada. I can tell Chris, from whom this question came, that I sent a letter to Minister Freeland in the lead up to the budget. And we set out a number of must-haves for us to be able to support her budget. She largely ignored that letter, but one of the items in that letter was a request, in fact, a plea, that as the government fine-tunes its policies for the business sector, including the CEBA program, that they come up with terms, repayment terms, that are reasonable and that reflect the times. If this government isn't coming forward with a growth budget, and they didn't, if they don't have a plan to reopen the economy, then it is incumbent upon them to refine their programs, their support programs, their emergency support programs, to have provisions that allow our businesses to survive, have reasonable repayment terms that reflect the times. The minister didn't respond, and obviously the budget doesn't reflect those kinds of refinements to our emergency support programs.
Yeah, and Ed, you've done a great job of suggesting to the finance minister that other jurisdictions have been able to come up with a plan. This isn't rocket science. Like, other jurisdictions have come up with a plan, and they've come up with a growth plan, but not our government. Do you want to add anything, Pierre?
I think Ed put it very well. At the end of the day, the government's budget is actually very simple. It's money in and money out. And the money keeps going out, but the economic engine of the country remains in neutral, so that it cannot produce the money to go back in. We have the number one export in our country is under attack by the federal government. Private sector output is significantly down. There's roughly 300, depending on how you count it, 300 to 500,000 ongoing missing jobs. And that does not include the most recent lockdown, because the job numbers don't include that yet. So we need to unleash the productive capacity of the economy in order to generate the revenues to pay off the debt. Now, that's what our ancestors did in the post-war period. From 1945 to 1973, our economy grew 300%. It tripled in size in real inflation-adjusted terms. And that's how we eliminated our war debt. So Ed is absolutely right. You need to unleash the growth of the economy in order to tackle this monstrous debt and secure our future.
Yeah, before we get to the next question, and Alberta has a solution for that. Allow the natural resource sector to get to market and do what they do well. The answer's hitting them right between the eyes, there's virtually no mention of the natural resource sector in that budget. And it is just incredibly sad that you wouldn't recognize how important that sector is to the return of the economy.
James, can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
Because I don't want those who are on this call to miss out on that key reality that you've just pointed out. This budget effectively turns its back on the natural resource sector, which has had such a positive impact on our national prosperity. And it gets worse because when it comes to the oil and gas sector, the budget includes a special tax credit for the carbon capture, utilization, and storage technology that is being developed in Canada. But what sector of our economy have they expressly said it doesn't apply to? The oil and gas sector, which is the world leader when it comes to green technology, when it comes to reducing the impact of a barrel of oil on our environment. I mean, our country and that industry is a world leader, and this government has turned its back on that sector. It is a shame, but it is reflective of what Trudeau's do, because, you know, Trudeau Sr. did the same thing to the West, and now Trudeau Jr. is doing the same thing.
Agreed. Okay, Mark, what's next on our Q&A?
This is a good segue into the next question. So this is from Jennifer. What's going on with Line 5?
Who wants to start with that? Pat, we'll let you start with that one.
All right. Well, we after question period today, I think it was, the speaker granted an emergency debate on it for tomorrow evening. So there will be a debate in Parliament on this. We have been calling upon the federal government for federal leadership on this issue since the governor first announced that they were going to shut this line down. There are tens of thousands of jobs immediately at stake in this across Canada, and I mean, the consequences of this line shutting down are they're immediate, and they will be felt acutely in Ontario and in Quebec and in other places as well. So it's actually quite amazing how quiet the Trudeau government has been on this. They just blandly say that, well, yes, Line 5 shouldn't shut down, but they don't appear to do anything about it. So we're going to have a very lively debate tomorrow night, I understand, on this, and we'll have to see how this plays out. I don't even know how to answer that question. The federal government has shown absolutely no leadership on 5 Line, and this is about to become a really real crisis for Canadians.
Pierre, why don't you add something? You're in Ontario. What's your thoughts?
Well, obviously, this would be catastrophic for Ontario. Many people would be left without essential energy, and I hope that the government takes it seriously. But it would be a very unfortunate message that if we only take seriously pipelines that matter in central Canada, we should be fighting for pipelines throughout the entire country. But you know what this might do is alert a lot of central Canadians to the essential nature of energy, that we use energy in our everyday lives in ways we don't even appreciate, especially in parts of the country where it is not originally sourced. So I'm hoping the government will fight back against the Michigan governor's edict. But it is, frankly, if the edict goes ahead, I can tell you it's going to be a very jarring experience for a lot of people who didn't realize how much energy they use to get through their ordinary existence.
Ed, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, Pierre said it very well, and I think I would just point out that this is what happens when Canada has weak leadership, when we have arguably the weakest prime minister in the history of this country, someone that the Americans mock behind his back. They do not respect Justin Trudeau. Certainly Donald Trump didn't, and I don't believe the Biden administration does either. And contrast that to what it was like under Stephen Harper, right? Strong leadership, someone who could have a good relationship with someone like Barack Obama. You know, these were not ideological soulmates, but they were able to work together because Stephen Harper was respected. And we need to restore that respect in Ottawa. And until Aaron O'Toole becomes Prime Minister, it's not going to happen. And I see the Americans, they're going to do whatever they want because they know there's a Prime Minister in Canada who actually isn't going to push back the way a Prime Minister should.
Yeah, I agree, Ed. You know, this government had 6 years to make sure that there was a solid North American strategy around energy. And this is what it's come to: the cancellation of Keystone XL and the discussion around shutting down Line 5. I just find it appalling. And the Americans will continue to source energy from somewhere. And it's just appalling that we couldn't develop this great relationship that we've had with our friends to the south. And now it's come to this. It's quite sad. Okay, Mark, what's up?
Okay, so the next question coming up here is from Thomas. Do the Conservatives support the National Childcare Plan, and do they have an alternative? James, I'll give that to you.
Thanks. Well, I tell you that the concept of a national childcare plan has been kicking around forever. I don't know. In fact, the other fellows on the call will be able to say how long we've been hearing about national childcare plan, particularly from this Liberal government. So I think conceptually we understand the need and we understand the importance of childcare and being able to have an engaged workforce with all people, everybody that is able to work, and particularly for those that are looking for childcare. What the issues with some of this plan is that you announce something, so you throw $30 billion at it that you're going to put over a period of time. It's going to average $10 a day. So you throw all this stuff out, which is classic Liberal policy stuff, that you throw it out, but you have to negotiate this with the provinces. And there's nothing that's been done ahead of this to be able to come up with a plan that would be satisfactory to the provinces. So, you know, my personal belief is that it should be a plan that's accessible for as many people as possible and not a restrictive government-run plan where a lot of people are going to be left behind in it. Anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd be glad to jump in because this is a big program. We're talking about $6+ billion to start off with, and then $9.3 billion ongoing. This is a new permanent spending program that is about regulated daycare. So let's not kid ourselves. This is not going to capture, you know, all Canadian parents. Millions of parents are going to be left behind under this kind of a plan. And the fact that, you know, they have to negotiate an agreement with each of the provinces. Now think of how long that's going to take. Even Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister, acknowledged today in her speech, yeah, you know what, in 5 years, we're going to have $10 a day daycare. 5 years? You know, the question was, okay, how many years have they been talking about this? Well, you know, it even goes beyond 1993 because in the 70s, the Liberals were talking about a national child care program. But in 1993 in the Red Book, it actually was made a formal promise they were going to deliver on that. And every single Liberal leader since 1993 has promised a national daycare program. And they have never delivered because they know they don't have to. They just have to mention it in their platform and people go, oh, isn't this wonderful? And we've seen this happen at committee this week at Finance Committee. One of the witnesses just praising the government. Oh, thank you for finally putting billions of dollars into this daycare program. Not understanding that this program will never see the light of day. What I would suggest is we as Conservatives came forward with the original Canada Child Benefit. which benefited every single family in Canada. Every single parent got the benefit of this. If you were going to build some kind of support to assist parents with daycare, with childcare, use the existing platforms that the government has. But no, this government doesn't want to do that. They want to talk about a big government-run program that's going to cost billions of dollars in cost overruns, and then they're not going to deliver what they should for every Canadian family that needs support. So, as you can tell, I am pretty hot under the collar about this particular program because it is virtue signaling of the worst kind. And trust me, this is not going to be delivered, just like all the other promises were acted upon.
All right, Pierre and
Ed
Pat,
was,
do you want to add anything to that?
Just quickly, Ed was summarized the a lot of the problems around this plan itself, but I have noticed that there's universal admiration for this kind of program from business leaders, labor leaders, academics, journalists, bureaucrats. All of the expert class declares that a national child care plan is the answer, the most important thing out there. The one group that seems the most lukewarm about this program are actual parents. And I really mean now. Parents are concerned about the cost of childcare. They are concerned about the availability, but the go-to answer that I don't hear from very many parents is a federal government national plan, institutionalized, bureaucratized daycare. That's not what I hear too many parents begging for. The Conservatives have already won one election on childcare plan, and I would be very happy to go into this next election and compare our approach of flexibility in supporting parents to delivering a grand new national system.
Couldn't agree more. Pierre, you want to add to that?
Well, just think of it conceptually. How is it possible that it would be more affordable and higher quality for a government to take childcare money away from parents on taxes, give it to the federal government, which gives it to the provincial government, which gives it to the municipal government, which gives it to an agency, which assigns that same family a daycare? Why not let the family just take their childcare money and choose the childcare option they like? Why would you insert 3 levels of government between them and the childcare space? And secondly, there are every single mode of childcare except one is excluded. It's like the old rule: you can have any color car you want as long as it's red. If you have a stay-at-home parent, if your grandparents take care of the kids, if maybe there's a neighborhood in-homes provider or a private daycare which offers specialized service because your child might be autistic, you get nothing. You get to pay taxes to fund the state option that you don't want, but you don't get any daycare for it. So you pay for something that you don't want and won't get. And finally, in Quebec, which we're told is this great model of utopia, there are great complaints by Quebecers about it. 50,000 kids are on the waiting list, so they have to pay taxes for this program. And many cases, that the families that want it, who are not all of them, don't even get the space that they're paying for because the government can't deliver. So you have 50,000 families paying for daycare on their taxes that don't get the daycare. Just give the money to parents. To conclude, childcare is not federal jurisdiction. It is not provincial jurisdiction. It is not municipal jurisdiction. It is parental jurisdiction.
Yeah, great answer. Thanks, Pierre. Okay, Mark.
Okay, so we have just under 7 minutes left, so we'll ask one more question, and then as always, I have one more question at the end for the 4 of you. So this question came into us ahead of time, and it's from Melissa. Melissa asked, how are we going to get out of this mess? Is there hope?
Okay, let's start with Pierre. I'll finish this one. I'll start with Pierre, and work our way through.
Yes, there's absolutely hope. We've done it before. Look, we were more in debt after the Second World War. In fact, that's the only time we've ever been this in debt. And you know what our ancestors did? They got off the battlefields, they went to the farm fields and factories, and within 1 year of the Second World War, they were running the largest single surplus in Canadian history, 5% of GDP, which would be like a surplus of $120 billion in today's terms. And they basically spent 3 decades growing our industrial power and paying off debt, raising the living standards of everyday hardworking Canadians who were the first generation to more or less be guaranteed the opportunity for home ownership, whose the riches they generated made it possible for people like me to go to university, coming from a middle class family. So yes, we've been in this kind of a mess before, although the last time it was caused because we were fighting Nazis, fascists, and Imperial Japan. This time it's being caused by reckless spending by politicians. But the point is, we as Canadians have dug ourselves out of these kinds of problems before to create immense prosperity and an improved future. So we absolutely can do it again.
Pat?
Well, Pierre's absolutely right, and I think that it will become increasingly clear to many Canadians that they need different leadership in order for us to get out of this mess. And the Conservative government, of which both Pierre and Ed were members of that government, we came through the last financial crisis better and stronger than any other peer country by a mile. And it's the leadership that we have within our own group that will be capable of delivering that leadership to get out of this mess. And I think that will, and I certainly hope that will become clear to Canadians and perhaps really be the ballot question of the next election.
And Ed?
Yeah, I want to get back to the issue of hope. Our hope is vested in Canadians themselves. It cannot be vested in the government that we have in Ottawa. That government will never provide us with a light at the end of the tunnel that Canadians are looking for. Canadians do want hope. They want confidence that their future is secure, that they have a government that can manage this massive financial consequence that the government has incurred. Pierre referred to reckless spending. And that's what we have now. In fact, it's the biggest spending budget. It is like spraying billions of dollars all over the place without a particular focus, without setting priorities. And when you have that kind of a prime minister and that kind of a management plan, there are 3 ways that you can make that sustainable. Well, I use that term sustainable cautiously. You can raise taxes, you can cut spending, or you can generate economic growth. And you know that this government has just come forward with a budget that is not a growth budget, despite promises by the Prime Minister that it would be. When you look at the investments they make, they are not investments in our long-term prosperity as a country. They're not investments that go into improving the productivity of our country, the competitiveness of Canada on the world stage. And when that happens, there is only one way a Liberal government responds, that is taxes. Now, Justin Trudeau, I can promise you, he will not go into the next election promising tax increases. But if he ever got reelected, you can expect income taxes to go up, carbon taxes to go up, GST to go up. Don't kid yourself. They are behind closed doors negotiating to bring in a home equity tax and an inheritance tax because they have this massive obligation they've incurred through the COVID pandemic because of poor management. How do they pay for it? They know they're not going to generate enough economic growth because Liberals just don't know how to do that. So they're going to raise taxes. Watch for it, folks. We have hope because Canadians are resilient. And from time to time, they see through what's happening with Liberal governments. And I'm confident that if we are on message and we stay disciplined as a party and as MPs in communicating that message, Canadians will hear that. They will respond to that, and we will win their trust. Justin Trudeau will no longer be the Prime Minister of this country. And then we can depend on growth to get us through this very difficult time.
Great, thanks, colleague. And I want to, there's a bunch of feedback there, Mark. So Melissa, I feel awful about, for you to ask that question, how do we get out of this mess, and is there hope? There is hope, and I have complete faith and hope in the people of Canada. The government's just got to get out of the way. So we're blessed with the abundance, like there's no tomorrow. There's countries that would die for some of the things that Canada has. A great people, well-educated workforce, abundance of natural resources. We have what the rest of the world wants. We just have to get it to them. And that, when Ed talks about growth, that's what the potential is. There's definitely hope. There's hope that we can get to market, grow our market share. We're a small population, but we're a mighty nation that has a lot of things that other people want. We just have to have a government that understands that and gets out of the way. And that will be the hope, to give promise to young people, to be able to get a job, to be able to grow and create wealth. That's what I was blessed with when I started, when I was 21 years old, into my first business. And I didn't even think about government. Government didn't even come across the agenda for me. It was, I want to go out and build something. We need to get back to that. And I think with a new government, we can get back to that and create those kind of opportunities. And frankly, folks, we need a new government, but that's up to you. And hopefully we'll have that opportunity soon. So Mark, we usually have our closing questions. Fire away.
Okay, closing questions. So Pierre, we'll start with you. Which meal is your favorite, breakfast, lunch, or dinner?
Breakfast by far. I actually think, I love the foods of the world. Like I love Middle Eastern food for dinner. I love Japanese for lunch. I love a nice sushi, but there's nothing better than the Canadian breakfast. I think that's the one culinary art where Canadians are the world champions. The great Canadian breakfast with thick slices of pea meal bacon, whole wheat, but thick pancakes drenched in central Canadian maple syrup. That is a delight. And we're the world champions of breakfast, and so it is my favorite meal.
Okay, the same question around the board, Mark. Is that the idea?
Same question around the board. So Ed,
right.
You want to go next?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I agree, breakfast. But it's not only that Canadians are really good at breakfast. It's also that breakfast is when I get a chance to spend time with my wife. We have a quiet time of half an hour to an hour when we've got each other to ourselves. And that's a real special thing to have, someone you can trust and share the most intimate details of your life and your concerns. And that happens around breakfast. By the time lunch and dinner happen, my 11 grandkids are probably piling into the house wanting Grandpa to play with them outside.
And Pat?
This is a tough one. I'm going to go with lunch. I do, this is more back to my business career as a parliamentarian. Lunch is a non-issue. It doesn't really happen. We have, average, sort of below average meals sometimes with a committee or in the lobby. But I, if possible, I do like to break up the day with a nice civilized noon or maybe 1 p.m. meal to recharge, maybe from being busy in the morning, and then carry it through to the afternoon. Not heavy. It doesn't have to be heavy. Not anything like that. I'm with Pierre. Sushi is among my favorite selections for lunch. Protein, but not too heavy. So I'll go with that.
James, let me just jump in on the breakfast piece. I didn't mention what my favorite breakfast is, what I have most mornings. That is Canadian porridge. But this is hot porridge, and my wife puts a whole bunch of frozen blueberries at the bottom of the bowl, and then the porridge goes on top, a little bit of Canadian maple syrup. Now think of that. You dig into that, put it into your mouth, and you get this explosion of flavor coming out of that blueberry. It's not only an explosion of flavor, it's the explosion of cold meeting hot. One of the most exciting meals I could ever imagine for a Canadian breakfast. Think about that.
That does sound very exciting.
So I'll shake it up. I'll be the guy that says dinner, and I'll tell you why. Is that I grew up in a house where I had a dad that was busy, 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 and there is nothing I enjoyed more than being home. Particularly Sundays were a big deal in our house, and still are today for my house. That we as a family would collect for dinner, and the idea of being out on the barbecue and being able to talk while you're preparing, and then all sitting around the table to be able to share stories, hear about your week, hear the good, hear the bad. Dinner's got to be it, and it's Alberta, baby. It's got to be some Alberta beef. So that's the
Barley fed.
that's the barley fed. That's the way it is in this province and in this house. So
Good stuff.
yeah. So listen, thank you to my colleagues tonight. I hope everybody that was watching found this informative. I'm blessed to be able to work with these great fellows. And, politics, although, I often get challenged that you're way too serious, James. Well, I'll tell you something. It's a serious game for serious people because we got serious things that we have to work on. And we're working hard for you. And every day, and I see the other three in the House every day, standing, working, and committee. It's a tough job, and particularly through COVID. But I can tell you, you've got great representation, and it would be even better if we were in government. I can assure you that. So thank you for attending tonight. Thanks, fellas, and see you in 2 weeks at the next Ask James Anything. Thank you.